The Rebecca Project for Human Rights is a national advocacy organization for vulnerable families, and we focus on the areas of reform in public health, criminal justice, and child welfare reform. At the heart of the way that the Rebecca Project for Human Rights does its work is through mother leadership and now through girl leadership. We work to address the unacceptable levels of gendered violence, poverty, and exploitation in order to improve the status of women and girls. We train vulnerable mothers and girls to advocate for sensible criminal justice, child welfare, and public health policy reforms. And we are working to dismantle the birth to sexual violence to incarceration pipeline that is specific to low-income girls. We are working to improve conditions of confinement for female prisoners. And the Rebecca Project strives all the time to reform the child welfare system by expanding family treatment capacity for at-risk mothers and children. We have a strong presence of mothers who go to the Hill every week here in DC, and then we have 11 chapters of mother advocates across the country who do that work at the state level and also come to DC and advocate for their own states and their own communities to their lawmakers.
At 13, I was raped by a friend, a childhood friend. The following year, at 14, I met a high school senior. It was an abusive relationship. I began self-medicating with marijuana and alcohol at the age of 14. It was the only way I knew how to cope with being physically and sexually abused. But after a while, this combination was no longer working, and I felt I needed something stronger to help me cope. With crack cocaine, I couldn't keep a job. I couldn't take care of my children, and I began to commit crimes in order to support my habit. My children were separated in foster care. My daughter Tiana, my son Trayvon were put in a group home. They were separated from their oldest brother, my son Dante, because Dante was labeled the parental child. Because in my addiction, he took care of me and he took care of his siblings. When I went before the judge for sentencing, I begged him for treatment. The judge denied my request. He told me he'd heard it before. I felt hopeless. I not only lost my children, I lost myself. In jail, there was no treatment available. I was surrounded by women like me, mothers with untreated addiction, mothers who had lost their children because of their addiction in jail, mothers like me who had a lot of guilt and shame because I lost my children. All that pain and all the things that I've done just built up inside, and feeling so hopeless and not having anybody there in the jail that that I could go talk to, that or any treatment or anything that would help me understand why I continue to use, or talk about the abuse that I've been through. But I've never talked about it. I hid it. When I was released, there wasn't any treatment or anything set in place to me. I was just released at 10 o'clock at night, $4 in my pocket, and I still didn't know where my children were. I went back to doing the only thing I knew, which was using drugs.
I started experimenting with alcohol at 14. I was raped at 15. I have been in abusive relationships. I have done a lot of things that I'm not proud of. And during my 34 years of addiction, I had gotten locked up. I had gotten arrested. And in getting arrested, I didn't receive any help for treatment, because what I found out later on is that I was an undiagnosed addict. And because I didn't get any treatment, I continued to do what I do, what I was accustomed to doing, and that was to continue to use.
I am the mom of 4 beautiful children. I was in a 11-year marriage that was physically abusive. The same year that my marriage ended, my mom passed, and I was severely depressed. I didn't know I was depressed. I just knew I was in more pain than I had ever experienced. I began to self-medicate first with marijuana, and when the marijuana stopped working, I began to medicate with crack cocaine. After the divorce, my biggest concern was, how will I be able to take care of my children economically? It went from that to not being able to just make sure that their daily basic needs were met, homework, preparing meals, that sort of thing. Crack cocaine is so debilitating that I was not able to do those things, and there was a lot of shame and guilt associated with that. It was because of the unaddressed issues of violence. That was the reason I was self-medicating in the first place. It's not like one day I just got the bright idea, oh, I think, I'll smoke crack cocaine today. I was really in tremendous pain and needed relief from that pain. And so I made the choice that a lot of low-income moms make, and that was to turn to the street to self-medicate.
I'm a mother who has been in recovery for 11 years. Because of my love for my daughter Sheena and my other children, Omar 11, Brittany 20, and LaShonda, who turned 30 last month, I was able to get off crack cocaine. I entered a family-based treatment program which allowed me and my family to get the comprehensive services that we needed to heal as a family. And as a strong, loving, reliable mother, I was then able to watch my daughter Sheena go on to earn a BA degree from Towson University in psychology, and then her master's from George Washington University in early childhood education. Sheena was excited about her first year as a preschool teacher. She often came home with stories about the kids, how they made her laugh, and she would come home with how she was going to teach them, methods that she was going to use. She was always working on lesson plans and progress reports. She was determined to make a difference in those children's lives, and she did. Sheena was shot in her head as she lay sleeping with her son in the next room. She was a beautiful child. She had a son. His name is Gary, aka Tucci, as Sheena affectionately calls him. He was the light of her life. I am now raising my grandson, Gary. Today, I am picking up the pieces of my life, but the puzzle will never, ever be complete. I miss my daughter, and it's unacceptable to me that I had to bury her at the age of 24.
I went in and out of single adult treatment for 2 years. All the while, the condition of my family was getting worse. My children were beginning to fail in school. My boys, who were preteens, were acting out. They were angry. But most of all, they needed therapeutic services for the harm that they had suffered as a result of my addiction as well. At the end of the 2-year period, I was finally referred to a family treatment program.
Family therapy was incredible, and for me, part of my treatment process was being reunified with my children.
Group hug! She hit me. That's how we get treated.
And my children getting the services that they needed, because they needed to heal from not only my addiction, they needed to heal from being separated from me.
To actually see pain lifted, there's nothing like it. Actually see hurt being gone. Actually seeing the trauma being told. It's amazing. I'm now 11 and a half years clean. Now I am a grandmother. My grandbabies love me. My children love me. I had 2 granddaughters who had graduated this year from high school, and they wanted grandma to be the chauffeur. Yes, I love it.
When I got my own place and it was me and my children, I really felt so worthy because I accomplished this. I worked hard. Gaining my children's trust again once we were reunified. If I say I'll be back, that means Mommy's coming back, because at a time in their life they knew I wasn't coming back. But today, they know I'll be back.
What's clear is the same pathway to addiction that our mothers face is the same pathway for girls. First, they experience physical and sexual violence. They either begin to self-medicate, or they have other behaviors that may lead them to the juvenile justice system. And so we've also now taken on the work of policy reform for our girls.